Mr. Chairman, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. I'm pleased to be appearing before this subcommittee for the first time as chairman of the National Endowment for the Arts. I look forward to discussing with you the President's fiscal year 2011 budget request of $161,315,000, which includes support for our ongoing activities, as well as $5 million for a new initiative we refer to as Our Town. Before I speak about the President's budget, I would like to briefly bring you up to date on what we have been doing since I joined the agency this past August. As you know, in fiscal year 2010, we expect to invest nearly $140 million in support of the arts throughout the nation. Through the more than 2,000 direct grants expected to be awarded, we can anticipate reaching nearly 100 million people. But our reach and impact go even further. Through the 40% of our grant-making funds awarded to the state arts agencies and their regional arts organizations, thousands of additional grants are awarded to support worthy projects in communities throughout the country. In fiscal year 2010, we have an almost $8 million budget for learning in the arts grants, and we will invest well over $4 million in arts education through our Access to Artistic Excellence grants and state partnerships. In addition, I've challenged my staff to find at least one arts education project in every congressional district. In order for the NEA to invest most effectively, it is important that the arts organizations and creative communities across this country feel closely connected to us. We are using technology to connect even more Americans with the agency. We have launched an agency blog on our website, www.arts.gov, and a Twitter account at NEA Arts. We will shortly launch a Facebook page to continue to broaden our reach and keep the public informed in real time. And we have begun webcasting agency convenings. Most recently, we webcast the March 2010 public meeting of our National Council on the Arts, which helped ensure even greater transparency into the work of the agency. Technology is no substitute for in-person meetings, so last October, I announced that I would begin an ArtWorks tour. When I say ArtWorks, I have three meanings for those two words. One, they are a noun that refers to the creation of artists, works of art. Two, they remind us that art works on audiences and viewers to transport and inspire them. And three, they are a reminder that arts workers have real jobs and are a vital part of this country's economy. I was in Pennsylvania last week, and the governor cited the Pennsylvania Cultural Data Project, which reports that in Pennsylvania alone, nonprofit cultural organizations and their audiences had direct expenditures of $1.99 billion, which supports over 48,000 full-time equivalent jobs and means over $900 million in resident household income. I began seeing how art works in Peoria, Illinois last November, and most recently, just last Monday in fact, I had the pleasure of joining Congressman Simpson in his district to see how art works in Boise, Jerome, and Twin Falls, Idaho. Everywhere I go, I see how the arts help create the sorts of places where people like to live, work, and play. In fact, Chairman Moran recently wrote in the Falls Church News Press about how the arts have transformed communities ranging from New York Mills, Minnesota, to Paducah, Kentucky. Thank you for that. And Professor Mark Stern, along with his colleagues from the University of Pennsylvania and the Reinvestment Fund, has discovered that the presence of the arts has three main effects. One, the arts are a force for social cohesion and civic engagement. People who participate in the arts are more likely to engage in other civic activities, leading to more stable neighborhoods. I consider that very important. Secondly, the arts are a force for child welfare. Low-income populations with high cultural participation are more than twice as likely to have very low truancy and delinquency rates. And three, the arts are a poverty fighter. They do this through direct employment, and they do this by leveraging other jobs, the restaurants, retail stores, and hotels that spring up alongside cultural districts. This brings me to the President's fiscal 2011 budget request for the National Endowment for the Arts. As you know, the NEA has a threefold mission: to support excellence in the arts, both new and established, to bring the arts to all Americans, and to provide leadership in arts education. The President's budget request maintains the NEA's positive momentum in providing support to this country's nonprofit arts organizations. There are two changes that I would like to highlight for your attention. In April 2005, the NEA launched a funding initiative called American Masterpieces that was designed to ensure audiences the opportunity to see classic American repertory. As we reviewed these grants, we realized that the sorts of projects and organizations being funded through this program were largely redundant to the support being offered through our core discipline grants. The one notable exception to this being the Big Read, which provides communities the opportunity to read, discuss, and engage with one another around a shared reading experience. This program will continue, and will continue as the agency's largest national initiative. In fiscal 2010, the NEA's budget contained $10 million in American Masterpieces funding. In our 2011 budget, you will see that we have proposed instead to have $5 million to fund Our Town, which I will discuss in a moment, $1.5 million to continue the Big Read, and the balance to contribute toward offsetting any differences between our fiscal 2010 and 2011 allocations for our direct grants. We are extraordinarily proud of the success of our programs and the benefits that accrue to the American people. We believe, however, that there is an element of our grant-making program that has been missing, an element that is particularly important today. This is, of course, the Our Town initiative presented in the full year 2011 budget. This initiative is built upon solid fact-based research, such as that of Professor Stern, personal first-hand observations, and the recognition that all Americans have an investment in the places they live. Through Our Town, we anticipate investing the proposed $5 million in up to 35 communities to support planning and design projects and arts engagement strategies. The funded projects might include the mapping of a cultural district along with its development potential, the integration of public art into civic spaces, a community waterfront festival, affordable housing for low-income artists, rehearsal spaces to serve as research and development space for our performing arts companies, outdoor exhibitions, and performances to enliven civic spaces and engage citizens, and so on. Almost every federal agency under this administration is looking at its role in helping to create sustainable communities, and I've been meeting with other federal agency heads to talk about ways that our agencies might partner in deep and meaningful ways. It is my hope that as Our Town recipients are selected, we can look at the other federal agencies working in those same places to discover areas of mutual interest and overlap. Everywhere I have gone over the past 9 months, I've been encouraged by the resilience and adaptability of our arts organizations as they strive to fulfill their mission in the midst of a challenging economy. They remain active and optimistic, and I remain eager to enjoy their work and offer the NEA support as effectively as we can. A thriving arts sector brings with it economic and cultural vitality that helps drive community sustainability. In short, art works. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Let me end by thanking the chairman and the distinguished members of the subcommittee for your ongoing support of both the agency and the arts. I look forward to our discussion, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Because we have other witnesses, this is not going to be as long as I wish it could be, because this is one of the most exciting aspects of the entire appropriations bill that we have to consider. But your request is for a reduction, and yet your initiative is to create jobs all over the country, new jobs, jobs that are designed to serve as a magnet for further economic development. I see the Ford Foundation is trying to do the same thing, again with limited resources, but they've looked at the research and understood that a theater or any kind of performing facility invariably serves as a magnet, and you get restaurants and retail and so on. Maybe you could share with us, if you had your druthers, what would this budget look like? I mean, you know, don't get too carried away, but you know, if you were asking for money that you know could be very well spent within the ensuing fiscal year, and spent to create more jobs and economic development throughout the country, what would you be asking for?
Well, of course, I'm here to defend the
I know
President's budgetary request.
That's why I asked you to go, to look beyond the parameters of the administration, and we're asking you directly if this were possible.
Well, if it were possible,
you
of course, I would love to see a restoration at least to last year's numbers. That's not really my call. I mean, I'm here to defend the budget that's submitted before us. I do know that the Our Town money, in my belief, is highly leveraged money. That money is going to have a ripple effect through all of the communities where we take this initiative. I'm convinced of that. Because it's only $5 million to start, we're going to have to start in very limited fashion, in only a few places. I think we're talking about 35 communities to begin with. But you mentioned something else that I think is very interesting here, which is you mentioned the Ford Foundation. They've recently announced a $100 million new strategic initiative in the arts that is very exciting to me. And I'm hoping we can work alongside them in some of the things that they're doing, which are very enlightened. One of the first things I did when I was nominated for this position, long before I was confirmed, was to meet with the heads of the major foundations that have interest in funding the arts, to talk to them about what they were doing. I met with Luis Ubiñas at the Ford Foundation, and Rip Rapson at Kresge in Detroit, and Luis Canales with the Irvine Foundation in California, and Don Randall at Mellon. They are very interested in the arts, and they seem to be very interested in what the NEA is planning to do strategically in the arts. And I'm hoping that one way we can leverage our very limited resources is through close cooperation with the private sector, foundations, individuals, corporations. I think that will be very meaningful for us going forward.
Well, let's just conjecture, if we were able to restore your budget to last year's level, how much additional economic activity do you think that would generate, given the fact that it's highly leveraged?
Well, the Our Town program, as we've conceived it, has a very high multiplier effect. One of the things we've learned is that as you bring art and artists into the center of town, it changes that town profoundly in every way, but certainly in an economic way. That, that expression in Field of Dreams, if you build it, they will come. We're doing the reverse of that. We're saying that if you come, they will build it. That if you bring art and artists into town, businesses will follow, because people don't follow businesses. Businesses follow people. And businesses are looking for an educated, committed, enlightened workforce. And that kind of workforce, if you poll them about where they want to be, they cite two things again and again: education and culture. Where you have culture in a community, you attract people, and those people attract businesses. And those communities start to change. We believe passionately that the arts revitalize neighborhoods and communities. And we're very committed to that.
Now, that's a compelling argument. Mr. Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for the coffee.
You're welcome.
Now I owe you one. Jeez, I'm sure you're going to get even at some point in time.
There'll be opportunities.
As I said, thanks for being here today. Let's talk a little bit about our town. $5 million. What can you do with $5 million in terms of, I think you said planning and design. Give me an example of what you might do. Grants are going to go out for $250,000, up to $250,000, I think. What do you expect? And I guess the reason I ask this is I agree with what you say and what you're trying to do. I wonder what you can do with such a limited amount of money in terms of such a big scope of planning and designing, especially when I look within the budget request, and not for the NEA, but for the National Park Service. There was a program that's gone on for years called Save America's Treasures. We have used that for seed money to restore theaters in communities and stuff. So, but how am I supposed to say it?
Pay him no mind.
Theater, tomato, potato. Yeah, one of those. Place where you go watch plays and movies, those kind of things. Seem to have lost my train of thought here.
Well,
no, but
what is our town going to be?
The problem is that I see we're reducing the budget here for that, and I've seen the great work that some of that does. We're reducing the budget over here, the proposal to eliminate that, and now we're starting a new program over here, which I'm not opposed to. I'm just wondering how it's different, what it is going to do to promote the arts in communities.
The three components will be planning, which might be the mapping of cultural assets in an area.
Like, give me an example. Like, what do you mean, mapping of cultural assets?
Finding out what's there, where they are, what their needs are, how they relate to the communities and to each other. Basically, to take stock of what is there. Another element is design. That's a big component of this, which is encouraging partnerships that link compelling architecture, energetic streetscapes, sustainable parks and landscapes. There's a great example of that in my hometown of St. Louis, Missouri, where it used to be people would come down from the suburbs to see a ball game at Busch Stadium, drive right back, park in the parking lot, drive right back to the suburbs. Now there's something there called City Garden, which is an open public sculpture garden that people now take time to mill through and to visit and enjoy. And what happens is they end up milling around downtown and engaging the rest of the city. They're not just making a one-shot to the ballpark. A lot of this involves preservation and creative reuse of buildings. Boy, did I see that in Boise. Yeah. The Egyptian Theater is almost a poster child for this and its effect on the economy of downtown. Look at the Basque development in that block, which is both preservation and creative reuse involved. This has a direct, demonstrable effect on local economies. In Old Town, taking a torpedo factory and making it into one of the most engaging collection of art galleries that you could possibly imagine. This is exactly what we're talking about with our town. To me, it is not only wonderful for the arts, but it's wonderful for the economies of every community that we bring it to, and I feel very strongly about this.
Are we being counterproductive, in your opinion? Maybe you don't want to answer this because it deals with another part of the budget, in eliminating a program over here that I think is very important in terms of saving historic treasures in this country, on the one hand, and starting a program to do maybe the same thing but more broadly on the other hand?
The historic treasures is not really... That's out of my department, really. So that's something I would have to get.
That would probably be a good thing not to comment on.
Be out of my league, I think. But I do know that these funds leverage very powerfully into the local economy.
Would it be?
I can give you one great example is in Detroit, where you have the old General Motors Design Center that had fallen into disuse. It's now been reborn as the Taubman Center, where they're training kids. There's a arts charter school and a college there to train kids in the new economy. They're training them in industrial design for the present day. It's the reuse of a building, and it's the training for the new economy in Detroit.
Would it be like in Idaho Falls, where I'm from, right along the river, the falls there, there's a nice park and area, and there's a road that goes by it, one of the main roads, and the city's considering closing it down. I mean, they got some nice artwork, outdoor artwork and stuff all along there. They're thinking about closing it down, making a walking area and all that kind of stuff, and connecting it with the Willard Theater, which is a performance arts center downtown. And they're looking at that to do that to kind of revitalize the downtown, the old downtown historic community.
That is exactly right. And I think the good news is that the administration gets this, how these engagements go across the typical federal agency guidelines. The Secretary of Transportation, Ray LaHood, doesn't view the Department of Transportation just as an engineering and road building agency. He views it as directly related to the quality of life in a community. So things like you've just described are very much in the wheelhouse of the Department of Transportation, and I think that's a very exciting development.
Another subject, just one more before we go on to Steve. The Big Read program, as we talked about when you were out in Idaho. This program is very popular throughout, I think, Congress, members of Congress throughout the country. We had looked at, I guess the goal at the time, it started as 10 pilot programs, and our goal was to reach 334 communities and stuff. With the 1.5 million we have, it's been substantially reduced. you're looking at 75 communities to do the big read in this year's budget. Substantial reduction, refocusing, and I understand that new administrations come in, they have different priorities, things they'd like to do a little differently, and you have every right to do that, and to put your emphasis on things that you think are important, like our town and stuff. But successful programs are successful programs, and I think we all understand that the Big Read's been a very successful program. Talk about what's going to happen with that, if you would.
The Big Read is a very, very popular NEA program, and it's popular with me. If I wasn't committed to the Big Read, I would abolish it. We're maintaining it as the largest funded NEA program. What typically happens with these programs is they get started up at a small level with seed money and maybe a few pilot programs at first. An example of this would be Shakespeare in American Communities or the Jazz Masters program. The Big Read is another example. They get ratcheted up to a very high level as you're building awareness of it throughout the country, and you do a build out to scale. And then they tend to go to a maintenance level where you feel you can have presence, strong presence throughout the country at a very high level on more of a maintenance commitment. And our $1.5 million is dedicated to that, and I think it's going to maintain the Big Read as a very, very strong program throughout this country.
Do you expect, with the reduction that's going on, communities seeing that this is a successful program to pick up the slack and start and move this program forward in other communities without necessarily having the NEA involved in it, just seeing that it's been a successful program?
That is the hope with every NEA program. If the programs are that good, they're going to be sustained one way or another. Certainly with our help, we have a major commitment to it, but I think the Big Read is a program that's been taken on by local communities everywhere, and I'm very hopeful about its future.
Thank you.
Mr. LaTourette.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Landesman, nice to see you. I very much appreciated the courtesy that you provided by coming to see me a little while ago. I didn't know you were a trifecta winner. You had hid that from me, and maybe a little bit later, if you're thinking of any lottery numbers, you could share that with us. I'd like to pick up where Mr. Simpson dropped off, and I'm a big fan of the Big Read program as well. Could you just, because I don't know, tell me things like how often you swap out the books and how are the new books selected?
That we'd have to get back to you with some staff input on that. I'm not familiar enough with the actual mechanics of the program to be very enlightening, but we can get you some information on that for the record for sure.
Okay, I appreciate that. And I think that at some point in the future, over my spring break, I went to toured a company called Playaway, and I was blown away. They basically have developed the technology where they have an MP3 player that plays on a AAA battery that's completely dedicated to a book. And so they have an agreement with the publisher, and it's very popular with libraries, and it's also very popular with the troops, because if you can think about it, I mean, you can take it in a little thing like this, a little tin, and you get one entire audio book with a AAA battery.
I'm a theater guy. I love literature. So did my predecessor. I think literature is going to have a very, very strong place in the NEA going forward.
Good. Well, I appreciate that. Mr. Simpson, in his opening remarks, talked a little bit about some of the controversy at the NEA in the 90s and so forth and so on, and I'm real familiar with that, and I said at last year's hearing, and it's worth repeating, that there wouldn't be an NEA if my mentor, Ralph Regula, hadn't stood up in the 90s in the face of some pretty serious pressure on my side of the aisle to defund. I can remember running for the first time in 1994, and you'd go to these very conservative groups that wanted to be supportive, and they'd say, well, the first thing you have to do is eliminate the NEA, the NEH, and public broadcasting, and defund them. And there were certainly some voices in the United States Congress in 1995 that were on that track, and I fully believe that Ralph Regula would have been the chairman of the full committee if he had not taken that position back in the 1990s. And I know that you know that, and I know you appreciate it. But the purpose of that long introduction, because I really don't want to suck up too much to Ralph because he's not here. When he's here, I'm really going to give him the whole big presentation. But after last year's hearing, there was in fact a little dust up going on. We had a hearing, and I can remember hearing some of the same voices. You go to a town hall meeting and said, well, wait a minute, there's somebody at the NEA that's sending emails around saying that the NEA should be there to support President Obama and his policy. And I don't know how you have a play about cap and trade, but I suppose you could do that. And so I'm just wondering what the status of that is relative to mission, and what happened to that employee, and anything you want to tell us.
Well, the fact is that it's my own personal view that the arts should not be politicized in any way, shape, or form, particularly the NEA. And in fact, there was a period before the time when I was confirmed, when I sent a very sharp email to a staff member that I knew at the NEA, expressing alarm that there had been a meeting that seemed to have a political purpose. The reference that you're making is to some conference calls that the communications director of the NEA attended without the authorization of the then acting NEA chair. In fact, she had specifically instructed him not to go. He went anyway, and the result is the dust-up that you're talking about. There are a couple of things I can report. Number one, that individual no longer works at the NEA. This occurred just before I arrived, and I dealt with that after I got there. And more specifically, I have instructed our general counsel to conduct training sessions about the Hatch Act with all of our staff at the NEA, including the senior staff and including myself. That session was held in October, and that is going to be an annual thing, along with continual ethics instruction from the general counsel. Ethics training is going to be part of what you do when you get to the NEA, and I'm going to do everything to make sure that nothing like that happens on my watch.
Well, you know, I really appreciate that answer, and I think that answer and that kind of attitude will make it a lot easier for people on this side of the aisle to be supportive of what it is you're doing. If any agency is seen as an extension of either political party, it's not good for the agency, and it's not good for the arts, and so forth and so on. So I appreciate that answer. I wish you good luck. Did you say you went to Twin Peaks, Idaho?
Pardon?
Did you go to Twin Peaks, Idaho?
I did.
Is that the TV show?
Oh, Twin Falls.
Oh, all right, Twin Falls.
No,
all right.
Twin Peaks is a TV show.
Well, that's what I thought, and I thought
Okay.
I was just wondering, and Twin Falls.
I can say this about Twin Falls. It's far.
Yes.
They're very good at distances there.
Yeah, and they apparently have a theater there as well.
There's a new theater and performing arts center, an arts center being built there with one of the most amazing views of the Snake River you're ever going to see.
Well, I appreciate it, and thank you for being here. I wish you good luck in what you're doing, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks.
If I might respond, Mr. Chairman, I went down to the Smithsonian the other day, and have any of you seen the art collection down there, the framing of the West, early photographs taken of the geological expeditions that were done? The most photographs of any one site are of Twin Falls, Idaho, and Shoshone Falls, and their beautiful theater.
Now I have.
No, I'm just kidding. Not their theater.
I actually have that. The Librarian of Congress gave me that book. It's on my coffee table, and I will look at that this evening.
Yeah, do that.
I'm okay. Thank you.
Well, I'm glad we've pursued that and clarified it. Thank you, Mr. LaTourette and Mr. Simpson. Let me just ask a couple of things. First of all, the state arts councils are sort of disparate in the way that they're dealing with the current recession. Some are maintaining their budget, others are cutting back on their budget. As far as I'm concerned, since this is very much a matter of leveraging, it would be unfortunate to enable the states to supplant their own contribution with federal funds. So I would hope that not be done. In other words, if a state is willing to hang in there and provide its own resources, then it should be more likely to get support. And those states that don't make it a priority, perhaps the NEA ought to be going around the state to the local levels that do understand how important the arts are to their communities. That's just a comment. I have one question that I think is useful for the record. Mr. Simpson and Mr. LaTourette, being the enlightened people they are not going to raise these kinds of questions, but there will be some who...
You will.
No, no, I'm probably not going to be honest with you, but I want to be prepared to respond to those who bring up questions that are unsubstantiated by the facts. And one issue that they might raise is some of the performances or shows or whatever that were funded by Recovery Act funds, the $50 million that was in the Recovery Act. You can't and don't try to control those, and I want to make it clear for the record. What you did was to enable people who were currently employed, in large part, to be sustained in their efforts to maintain artistic activities. So you were providing jobs, not funding specific projects or shows or whatever. That was up to the discretion of the individuals. And if you might want to elaborate that on that for just a moment, Mr. Landesman.
Yes, indeed, and thank you. The process for the ARA grants was similar to the normal grant-making process. There's a panel review. It's submitted to the council and to the chairman. And except in this case, it was somewhat accelerated. We had readers because there was a very condensed time frame that we had to get these grants out. But the criteria were different. What the panelists were looking at in terms of the ARA-related proposals was one thing: job preservation and creation. That was the evaluation metric. If it preserved a job or created a job, and it could be proven and established, that proposal would get a high mark. If not, not. That was the sole criteria. And this was about jobs.
Good for you. Well, that's what it was intended to do, and I'm glad you clarified that so that any criticism of activities that were funded would be misdirected at the NEA. It would, if the criticism is proper, then it should be at those local activities and it was the judgment of individuals that were not under your control, of course. With that, Mr. Simpson, did you have any further questions?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Let me follow up on what you just said, though. The American taxpayer looks at it as their tax dollar. They don't care if it goes to the NEA, to the local people, or who it goes to. They look at it as my taxpayer going to something that they think might be inappropriate. So the NEA has to be, even though you put it out as a grant and the grant makes the final decision, et cetera, that doesn't sell with the American public that might be opposed to some of the stuff. And I think that's how we get ourselves into the situation that occurred in the 1990s. So the NEA has to be responsible for those grants by putting some type of I don't know, guidelines on what some of this stuff can be done. Because what I don't want to do is I don't want to go through the 90s again, and I'm sure you don't either. We want to move the arts forward in the country. Tell me about where our country stands in terms of public support for the arts versus other countries, if you would, because I know you've had some comments on that in the past, and fortunately or unfortunately for you, your comments always get reported.
Well, there's really two questions in there. One is, as you know, we have a very thorough review process for our normal grant-making efforts that have a lot to do with the proprietary quality of the individual grants and the appropriateness of them. And I think we do a very good job of monitoring that. The ARA grants were specifically about jobs, and we're in a different category, really.
But they're in a different category, but the public is going, you know, if they think something's inappropriate and they're funding it with their tax dollars, they don't care what category it's in or whether it's about jobs or anything else. They're going, what the hell is going on with my tax dollars? And ultimately, we have to be responsible for it. Ultimately, we are responsible in Congress. So,
right, but going forward, the NEA grants with the budget that we've been given are going to be given in accordance to the processes that we've been using all along. And I think you've seen that in recent years, those have been very, very effective. And I think we'll continue.
Before you answer the second question on that,
yes,
are you going to recommend changes to the guidelines that Congress has put in place? You've suggested that before because supporting the arts is supporting artists, and of course we've kind of gone a different direction in years. since the 90s, and you suggested maybe that we need to be changing direction a little bit. Are you gonna...
That's not part of my agenda this year.
Okay.
The other question is an interesting one because, and I have to be a little careful how I answer it because I am here to defend the President's submitted budget, which I very much believe in. If you're talking about the United States and how it compares to the rest of the developed world, there's a sharp contrast in the level of public art support. There's no question. England is the country in Europe that is the worst supporter of the arts in terms of public dollars, and their budget for the arts is $900 million. That would translate in the United States to $4.6 billion on a per capita basis. We're not going to see that in my lifetime or yours. And there are some, we're not exactly comparing apples and apples here because we have a much stronger private sector engagement with the arts and support of the arts in the United States than they do in Europe. But from a purely public perspective, there's no question the support of the arts is much greater in Europe.
Do we have, or does Europe have, or other countries have the same type of tax benefits and stuff that we have in this country for private involvement and stuff?
We have a system that encourages private giving, and that's one of the reasons we have such strong private participation and support for the arts, no question.
Well, thank you, and thanks for being here today. I look forward to working with you, try to advance the arts in this country. You do an important job.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Simpson. Mr. Lautrec, did you have any? Okay. Very well done, Mr. Chairman. In your first appearance, I hope there's going to be many, and we look forward to seeing the impact that you're going to have on this country. We fully understand that there is no finer person with more qualifications, but more importantly, more motivation and insight into how to make the arts defining of our civilization than you, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Landesman, thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.